Yeah, Arlene, why don't you go ahead and make this official?
Fellow Toastmasters, I call this meeting to order. It is our first meeting of March and our first meeting as an official chartered club, Online Presenters. And I would like you to help me welcome our newly elected president and founder, David Carr.
Thank you, Arlene. So welcome to Online Presenters. This is a Toastmasters club dedicated to learning better skills for webinars and online events of all sorts. This meeting will be recorded. We say that at the top of the agenda to make sure that everybody has fair warning. This particular meeting will most definitely be shared out as a replay. So don't expect me to contact you for a photo release or a video release later. You were warned. But in general, exceptions can be made on request. If something didn't come out well and you don't want it to be shared, give me a heads up and we will not embarrass you. Thank you to RingCentral, which is sponsoring us for the online meeting environment that we're using. RingCentral offers a co-branded version of the Zoom video client that they have integrated with some of their other projects, including the GLIP team messaging and collaboration system that I work on quite a bit, which is what you're seeing here, where we can ring out and spontaneously invite somebody to a video meeting. It is important to get used to using a headset or earbuds, and particularly knowing where that mute, unmute button is on the screen. At a few points in the program, we may mute everybody, but you can unmute yourself. There is also a way to pin the video that you want to have selected. By default, the software just switches back and forth based on who is talking. And sometimes it might not be the person who is speaking or the person who the focus really should be on. That's the way of keeping the right thing in focus. We do want to pay attention to time so that we can hold our meeting in an efficient way and get a lot done. So we will observe the standard times for meetings, 5 to 7 minutes or whatever it says in the manual, with a 30-second grace after that. You may want to get a timer on your phone so that you can monitor yourself or have a stopwatch nearby, so that if you have trouble keeping track of the timer's video feed while you're presenting, you'll have an independent way of knowing whether you're going over. And Arlene's going to talk about some little flourishes she's working on for trying to figure out better ways of performing the timer role in a moment. And we're going to try and keep it all pretty compact. Now, we're actually not following, we're still defining what the regular meeting format for this club looks like. We're not really going to be following it exactly this time because we've asked Roger to take over the entire evaluation portion of the meeting. And we'll see how that works. This is actually a proposed policy, so I'm actually going to take a moment now to, this is a recommendation of the board. So Online Presenters chartered as an advanced club. By default, if people are in Toastmasters, if they've given more than 6 speeches and they want to learn these skills, we still go through the formality of voting them in, but that's the normal qualification level. We do have some other people who we have attracted who are doing online presentations professionally, or they may have other credentials such as National Speakers Association, but not necessarily be in Toastmasters. So in that case, they may be invited to apply. The board needs to vote to recommend that they be invited to apply. We do also ask that as a routine matter, prospective members should attend at least 2 meetings as a guest, and then we'll ask you to make a 1 to 2 minute speech about why you want to join and what you can contribute to the club. So this is a recommendation of the board. We actually need to ask for a vote of the members. I'm going to unmute everybody And are there questions about this policy? Does anybody have any concerns about it, or can we proceed to a vote?
David Irma here. I think it's pretty clear and it sounds good to me.
David, the other question I have for the secretary is, will we be getting printed minutes or a record of the different things that the club, the board comes together with?
Well, it probably wouldn't be printed, but I think we have a members only section on the blog, so minutes can be posted there if people want to review them later, or we can share them out by email.
Okay, thank you.
So with that, if there's no further discussion, tell me if there's further discussion, but if there's no further discussion, can we ask for a motion?
So moved.
Second?
I second.
All right, voice vote. Aye?
Aye.
Any nays? Okay, it's official. All right. With that out of the way, let's do it. So we have a program that is a little bit simplified from our usual format. We're not going to have table topics, but we are going to have 3 speeches instead of 2. And a lot of the other roles I've melted away because I'm basically asking Roger to do everything. No pressure, Roger. But Arlene is going to be our timer. Arlene, do you want to explain how you thought you would perform the timer role this time?
Yes. First of all 3 speeches are 5 to 7 minutes, and the 3 evaluations will be 2 to 3 minutes. Somebody's making a lot of noise.
All right. Well, let's try and mute again, and you can unmute yourself. Okay.
And the evaluations will be 2 to 3 minutes, and then afterwards there'll be a Q&A and an extended evaluation if he wants. And this is how it's going to go. I'll just run you through this really quickly. There's a green light, and I'll turn off where it says green. And that, oh, I forgot to mention that when I do turn the green light on, I'm going to do a little chime. Can you hear that?
Yep.
Just a short one. Then it'll be yellow, another little chime. Turn off the yellow and the yellow. Then it'll be red. And if you go over, you will get this. And a yuck bell. And
Do we have a 30-second grace period at the end of the 7 minutes?
Yes.
Yes, at 30 seconds after 7 minutes, I'll roll my eyes and give you a little yuck bell. If you go 30 seconds more, I'll get a little bit louder.
Right.
And if you go beyond that, it's up to David to maybe whatever. Maybe he'll mute you.
These are pretty well-behaved Toastmasters, I think.
Okay.
All right.
And don't forget to pin me if you want to see all this, or if you don't just want to hear the chime. But if you want to see all this, make sure you pin me and have me there close to you.
Right. I think if we were talking about this earlier, I think if you are sharing your screen, pinning doesn't really help, but you can scroll up and down through the little thumbnail videos on the side of the screen and find the timer. So try and give yourself a few, if you need a few seconds to get oriented and get the video aligned before you start speaking, take the time and get it right, okay? So, let's commence with our speeches. Our first speaker will be Phyllis Harmon. She is going to be giving a speech on 4 pillars of excellence, internal marketing. And this is Competent Communication Project number 8, Get Comfortable with Visual Aids. In this presentation, Phyllis Harmon, who's a past District 7 Director and current Public Relations Manager, will share an internal marketing program she created to retain members and stop the revolving door syndrome experienced by many volunteer organizations. Please join me in welcoming Phyllis.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
We can.
Great, thank you. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Thank you. As a prior TRIO member, club growth and retention were always top of my mind. In looking at retention statistics across the entire spectrum of volunteer organization, there is a universal concern about the number of members who fail to renew each year. According to Toastmasters International, globally, 68% of members don't renew because the people they deal with are indifferent to their needs. Research indicates that 20% of the new members you bring through the door will not renew. The American Society of Association Executives says the number one reason members do not renew is perceived lack of value. In other words, your members did not believe that the value they gained from joining your club justified the cost of their dues. Toastmasters, I'm here to share that marketing your club doesn't stop when the application is signed and money changes hands. I submit that to retain members, your internal marketing program must be founded on 4 pillars of excellence: communication, active engagement, recognition, and encouragement. To make it easy to remember, just use CARE, C-A-R-E. If you do, your members will feel valued, committed to your club, and become your voice in the marketplace. First and foremost, communication is essential to the health of your club. While members are the lifeblood, communication is the oxygen that breathes life and energy into the process. There is nothing worse than being left out of the communication loop. In business circles, that's considered the kiss of death. In a club, being out of the loop can have the same devastating effect on membership retention. Mistakes happen. Unfortunately, too many mistakes can drive people away from your door. Let me give you an example. You've changed your club meeting place again. The night before the meeting, let's say around 9 p.m., you remember to email everybody about the location change. What are the odds they read your message? How many do you think ended up at the wrong location? If members find themselves out of the loop on important club decisions, how do you think that makes them feel? Engaged? Part of the team? Loyal? Perhaps not. The second pillar of membership retention is active engagement. Active engagement means providing opportunities for members to work together towards a common goal. People need to be needed. If you give them the chance to make a difference, they will. Building club loyalty is as simple as identifying a need, putting together a committee to tackle it, and giving them the latitude to be creative. In one of my clubs, we continue to retain membership by involving members in costume-themed meetings and then celebrating their success. The club's retention rate of 81.4% continues to exceed the Toastmasters International rate of 55.4%, indicating a strong, healthy club. Engaged members with a shared vision will inspire each other to be successful and, more importantly, loyal to your club. What is your club doing to actively engage the members? The third pillar of membership retention is recognition. It's a form of recognition that's based on shared experiences and a willingness to step beyond the ordinary.
Excuse me, Phyllis. I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt you for a minute because I think you might be If you're advancing through your slides, we're actually not seeing the slides advancing. We're just seeing, we're seeing the PowerPoint application. So I think there's something where you may have selected the wrong screen instead of sharing your whole desktop.
Okay, it says stop sharing, so I'm not sure what's going on. So I will stop now.
Yeah, try stop sharing. I hesitated to interrupt you, but I think we should try and give you a chance to do it right.
Okay, that's a stop share.
So when you go back to screen share, try share whole desktop.
Share whole desktop.
Which I think it should be the first option.
And then share screen.
Share screen. And then try.
What do you see now?
Now we see your slides. So
You see recognition.
I'd like to give you a chance to go back to the beginning and start over.
Is that all right with everybody?
I think we have enough time.
Okay, let me see if I can get it to grow backwards.
Just page up should work.
Okay. Yeah, now I'm stuck. Okay, I'm going to abandon this so that we can continue with the meeting, and then if there's time at the end, I'll do it again. Let's move on.
All right.
Oh, I already reset the clock.
Well,
That's okay.
That's okay. It was at 4.5 minutes.
why don't you continue from this slide if this is where you were in the presentation?
Because I can't get my screens to move forward now. Everything's stuck. So I'm going to abandon this if you don't mind. And like I said, if there's time at the end, we'll come back.
Well, you could just escape and then start your slides from the current slide. See the second option there? From current slide? Yeah, right there.
No, not the Zoom controls, the PowerPoint control she was talking about.
Okay. All right. Now this is why okay, so I'm going to share the screen.
That's why we're here, is to practice. So let's.
Yeah. So the very first one, share screen, and then I'll start from where we're at. Okay, then let me see if I can move backwards and forwards. Yep, now I can. Okay, do you want me to continue on from here?
Yeah, why don't we try that? Yeah.
Okay. All right, sorry for that.
I'm sorry to rattle you too.
I'm not rattled, it's just that I didn't know it wasn't working, but thank you. Okay, so the third pillar of membership retention is recognition. It's a form of recognition that's based on shared experiences and a willingness to step beyond the ordinary. When members consciously connect with each other at a deeper, richer level, they commit to keeping the bonds intact. When your members achieve their goals, are given an award, graduate from a program they've taken, or simply celebrate any other life event, recognize it. I remember receiving my first Competent Communicator Award. My employer recognized my award at a team meeting by having everyone give me a piece of toast. It was fun and very much appreciated. So the question is, what does your club do to foster a culture of recognition among its members? The fourth pillar of membership is encouragement. Encouragement means listening and understanding how your members really feel. Your words spoken at just the right time can make the difference between defeat and the motivation to continue on. I was seated next to an accomplished speaker a couple weeks ago who gave an amazing speech and received great applause from the audience and greater accolades from the evaluator. He, however, was not happy with his performance. "What's the matter?" I asked. "Did you see how I froze when writing on the board? I wanted to walk out the door and never come back." I told him that his speech had been insightful, full of humor, and his message had resonated with me, that he inspired me to adopt his message as my own. We then talked about tips for getting past brain fog the next time it happened. By the end of our conversation, he was feeling better about the presentation he'd given and signed up for his next speech. The message I want to leave you with today is remember that marketing your club doesn't end when the application is signed and money changes hand. Use care, communication, active engagement, recognition, and encouragement. The 4 pillars of excellence of internal marketing to retain members and create a club culture that will have potential members flocking to your door. Back to you, Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you, Phyllis.
Now I gotta stop sharing.
All right. All right, our second presentation, or second speech, will be from Fabiola Cleoffa. She tells me to think Cleopatra, so I'm going to work on that. She is doing Speaking to Inform #3, the demonstration talk. Title is The Basics from the Base. Now, I'm not exactly sure what she's going to be talking about, but her objectives are to prepare a demo speech, to clearly explain a process, product, or activity, and conduct the demonstration as part of a speech delivered without notes. Fabiola, you're on.
Oh, okay. Let's try it again. With a show of hands, let's see how many of you have ever logged on to the member site of Toastmasters. Okay, you can lower your hands. Toastmasters meeting, fellow Toastmasters. This was my experience at a training given to a divisional council comprising of about 35 members. This question I raised because I was curious to know how many of the Toastmasters do log on as a member on the Toastmaster website. Interesting. More than half of them have never logged on to the website. Oh yes, they do log on. They go to the website and they go straight to the leadership column, look up their Distinguished Club program, and that's it. And mind you, these are club officers. So preparing for the pathway, since I'm an ambassador, this will be one of the basics to go on to the base camp. So I developed a training so you and everyone that does want to encourage going into the pathway to give this to members. It is basic. And you would be surprised how many Toastmasters can. We do have about 2 years. Why do I say this? Because as onliners, we will be the last ones to be rolled on. So one of the things that we can start doing to prepare for this pathway, which I'm very excited about as I see it, so we can go on and help others also to profit from this. The training that I have developed is very basic. But most of us won't think about these little things to do. So let me share it with you. Log on. How many of Toastmasters just go onto the website and they don't see this tiny little word? Log in. So you have to point them out where it is situated at. And once they log in, they will find this screen. Okay. When they find this screen, what is my username? Well, do you receive the Toastmaster magazine at home? Yes. It's still in the plastic. Oh, okay. On the label, you will see your Toastmasters ID. So you just fill it in, and then you go to forgot password. Did I forget? No, but you have never logged in, so you need to get one. When you click on Forget Password, it will ask you to enter your email. Pretty easy, isn't it? Just follow the instructions. One of the curious things that I did find out, and this is an actual screen from a member that I just helped a year ago to log on for the first time on the website. This member has been a member since 2009, and in 2016, that was the first time I was helping her to log on to the website. So, do you know which email address you have? No? Okay, Toastmaster will give you the choices that they have on file. But can you imagine? You see here two possible email addresses. One of them is her work email address. The other one is in Hotmail. Does she ever go to the Hotmail address? Nope. And the work address doesn't allow her to go onto the website. So I had to help her to get to Hotmail and then go on to the website. Little things, basics, but need to be shown. So when she finally got the email from Toastmasters International, I helped her log in, and voila, she sees her name. Welcome, Jacqueline. So that's how I showed her, okay, you not only get to go to the Leadership Central, but you can get to the cool things, like your own profile. And this was her profile. And let me show you something very interesting. This Toastmaster, if you can see the officers held, since 2009 till 2016, she has held about 6 officers. Never logged on onto the website. Why? Most of the time, either the Vice President of Education, the President, or even the past President will help them to log on and register everything. So she doesn't need to. I also showed her her education award. And why is this important to have Toastmasters now start getting on? Oh, I'll show you a sneak peek of the base camp. This is something that we as ambassador got to know. But this is pretty interesting, and wow, this is what we have today. So anybody can go and log on to the website today, go to the education tab, and they can start looking into pathways and get excited about it and start preparing themselves. I even tried to log in, but I got the message, you're not authorized to continue. But at least I got to see the screens, the icebreaker, and everything. So I encourage you all, as onliners, start helping our fellow Toastmaster to log on to the website. Toastmaster for meeting.
Perfect. All right. And we have one more. John Quick is doing competent communication number 7. Research your topic, 5 to 7 minutes. Title is Easy Green Screen. John Quick has been putting a green screen to the test in online Toastmasters meetings. He's going to share a simple, cost-effective setup that will help you use a green screen as well. His speech comes from the Company Communication Manual, Project 7, Research Your Topic, and is titled Easy Green Screen. I think I already said that, but I'm reading it because that's what it says here on this piece of paper. Let's see. And so I'm trying to find the John Quick screen so that I can pin you and your video will be preserved for all time. John Quick, you're on.
Who doesn't want to present from an exotic location, like the docks of Malaysia for the sunrise? or perhaps from the moon. Toastmasters, guests, and special evaluator. Today I'm going to give you a glimpse at the easy green screen setup. It's a simple, cost-effective way you can do things like this and more. Oh. Here's what my real room looks like right now. As you can see, there's a green cloth behind me, and it's just hanging up there on a rig. This is the green screen that allows me to do all these camera tricks. Let's talk about the basic setup that you need to make this happen. I'll put up a diagram now. Here you see your green screen in the back there. You have your presenter or your subject in the front, and three very important lights. Lighting is one of the most challenging and most important parts of this green screen setup. Let's turn some lights on here to demonstrate. What you see here is on the sides of the green screen. I've done some testing here. I tried to do as little as possible to get a green screen setup. And what I found is I can only do it at least with having these two lights on the side of my screen. The idea here is that you're projecting light across the entire screen and evenly lighting the screen as best you can. And the reason is this whole trick works with software that identifies a particular shade of green in your image, and it tries to eliminate all of that exact shade of green from your picture. So the more even and smooth and one single shade of green you can get things, the better. When you have a nice evenly lit picture, you end up with one shade of green. Imagine having things like a shadow or a light placed only on one side of a screen. What you'll end up with is some parts are darker, some parts are brighter, some parts are in the middle, and this causes problems with your software. So really lighting is the whole thing here. So I suggest putting two lights. I just use $10 floor lamps that I got at the general store with regular bulbs. So you can do it pretty cost effectively, but you do need those lights. Now the other one, which hopefully a lot of us already have set up, is a light on your subject. This is separate lighting from the screen itself. That's just so you appear bright on screen and easy to see. One other thing I'll mention here on this diagram is the presenter should be approximately 4 to 6 feet in front of the screen. And that's because the presenter himself or herself can cast shadows back on the screen, which again will trick your software. All right, I'm going to come back on now and just demonstrate some different backgrounds. Some of you said in past weeks, you said, why are you using that black background? You're fading into the back. Well, part of the reason was because if you have a little bit of imperfections, you don't see it on the black background. Switch to gray now. It still looks pretty good. We see the contrast is much better between me and the background. One of the most difficult things to achieve is white, a nice pure white background. But if you look closely, you're going to start seeing little squiggly things around the edges of my image. That's where the imperfections in the software come into play. And a lot of people think that the software is the big deal here, but it's not so much. It does pretty much everything for you. It's only the lighting that determines how well this comes out. I'm going to change just a little bit. It's only a sliding bar. I promise it's nothing too fancy. All I'm doing is changing a slider up and down right now to remove the green. So again, as long as your lighting is okay, the software, whichever version, there's different ones for Windows and Mac, and I think we can discuss that separately. The software handles it for you as long as the lighting is okay. Okay, so let's talk about a little bit of practical stuff here. Just yesterday, I helped the Firebirds Club with its online competition, and I was the timer. So let's look at a practical way we can use this kind of stuff. I was on the screen quite a bit as a timer and doing things like this, giving people a nice bright green picture, or the yellow, or the red. And that's just a visual aid. That's something I think we can accomplish better in an online club than we even can in a person one. You can give people a nice bold picture. Also with things like the odd counter to do tallies or to make notes. So that's where the green screen also helps us. And if you're not convinced yet, I've prepared a few examples of how people in our club might use a green screen to accent their own shows that they might do. So before I turn this back over, I want to give everyone just a few seconds to look at these and imagine yourself on the green screen. Okay, can you picture it yet? I hope so. Let's talk about the green screen some more. Toastmaster.
All right, thank you, John. All right, you can stop your screen sharing so that we can go back and see each other. And we'll turn things over to Roger. Roger, you still are, you are here somewhere, aren't you?
Yeah.
There he is. Okay.
Yep, just parking here, hanging out in the background.
Okay. All right. Well, you're on. So we're asking you to try and give, a couple of minutes of feedback to each speaker, and then we can just chat some more a little bit about what would make this a more productive experience going forward.
Yeah. So since this is a little more of a learning experience, instead of trying to follow a typical Toastmaster evaluation format, let me both make some comments for each speaker, and then kind of just some overall comments, because there are several that will apply to everybody.
All right. Well, I'll tell the timer to relax, and we'll let you riff.
Well, you can either time me or here's
So
my
no
version.
timing?
All right. Well, can you do 2 minutes per speaker, and then 2 to 3 minutes per speaker, and then move on to the general feedback?
We'll do that.
All right. Timer. We'll do her thing.
All right. If everybody,
I'm gonna mute everybody again, and you can unmute yourself, Roger.
and then we can come back and at some point talk about, in fact, why that happens and what you can do to help others out besides just hit the massive mute button. Phyllis, thank you for sharing. I remember you were area governor for us here in Northwest Oregon. Am I remembering right? A couple things that I'll share with you, and I'm going to be a little harder on you because you're experienced.
Okay.
All right. One, great message, because it is so dead on. The idea that we need to continually create or help, not assume that people understand value, I think is an important piece of what it is that we do in our clubs, and we're all part of that. Now, by and large, actually, I'm not going to comment on the content of most people's stuff, other than I know that Phyllis has had a unique place in our part of the world anyway. Plus Delta, a couple things that I really liked. I love the fact that in your PowerPoint you did not use a template. I'm a big fan of saying that I believe that the human experience in this environment is actually more like television or movies. And I think that visual engagement beyond the video camera is really important. And I think, and since we know that the reticular activating system tunes out sameness, one of the challenges with PowerPoint templates is that, after we've seen that kind of curly blue thing at the top, it's useless. So Phyllis was a great example of using just each slide as a blank canvas. And being very visual is a great thing, just like being on television, right? We wouldn't see lots of bullet points on television. That's a great thing to remember for everybody that we can take away from Phyllis's experience here. One of the notes that I made was around the full screen PowerPoint. Each of us probably experienced that it wasn't advancing, and I think David did the right thing by just jumping in because we're all here to learn. And I'm going to bet that just having gone through that one time, Phyllis never has that issue again. You'll know that, and you know what? That's it. It's not hard. It's just different, right? So,
Yeah.
Totally fair. The one other Delta comment that I would make, Phyllis, is it looked and sounded like you were reading. Busted. And I'm not saying don't do that. What I am, here's how I'm going to take an observation for you. David, can you hit that mute button again? We're getting getting attacked by Chup. Here is one thing how I'll take a comment for Lois and just turn it into a learning experience for everybody. In your in-person club, how do you receive it when someone reads? It's not wrong, but it's much more tempting here because we can hide, we can use the webinar platform as our teleprompter if we've got our slides in front of us, that kind of thing. And all I'll say is that you got to be really, I'm going to be base here, you got to be really freaking good to read and not have people tell that you can read. And here's the other point, making eye contact with the camera as opposed to my eye contact with down here, right? And I'm looking, big difference. We can tell that you're not looking at us, and that's okay. All right, there's my client. Get the hell out of here, Roger. All right, moving on. Fabiola.
Wait a moment.
Oh, yes.
Just let me reload here.
All right. So when does the technology help? When does the technology get in the way? That's
Okay,
the question.
you go.
Fabiola, thank you. And I probably not the first time you've heard this, but I just love your accent. I will say this in kind of the Delta category. There's a couple times that clarity of diction would have been useful for me, and it could be because I was sitting here typing notes. Here's some couple things that I loved. The way that you kicked it off by actually suggesting a show of hands was brilliant. It's beautiful. That's exactly the nature of one of the ways that we can say we can connect with people in this environment like we connect with them in person, right? Now, here's the Delta. I call this verbal body language, providing someone even passing explanation for how to find that. So, hey, everybody, give me a show of hands. How many of you have logged on to the national or international Toastmasters website? Hey, by the way, down at the bottom of your little viewer there, you'll see that little participant button. And if you click on that participant button, you'll see that you can raise your hands, right? Here's another little suggestion there. When you have somebody do that, if you look and see that somebody has raised their hand, you could actually call them out by name, which would dramatically increase. Oh, Coach Carol just raised her hand. Thank you, Carol. Okay, right, everybody can put their hands down. All right, and I'll move on. The level of engagement that happens, you don't have to call out 21 names or 22 names to do that, but people immediately realize that you see them, right, in a very different way, which is a highly engaging tactic. Love the visual and the visual change. The fact that you weren't using PowerPoint the whole time and then turned on your PowerPoint created visual change. And we know that cognitively, change gets and captures attention. It's built into the reptilian part of our brain. And one other little Delta that I'll throw in there, the standard font in PowerPoint, which is Calibri, looks a little plain. It's really easy to find the different font. And by the way, if you go to the little chat, here is my favorite place for finding free fonts. And if you want something that looks different even than what PowerPoint has built in, defont.com and some similar ones will allow you get free and shareware kinds of fonts for you to be able to do that. I love the way that you shared with us, Fabiola. Thank you. Great message. ready for me, Arlene?
Yes, yes.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
sorry. As soon as it went black.
Nope, all good. I was trying to give you time to get a reset.
Okay.
Thank you, John. Beautiful. I love you make me look sad because you had all these awesome backgrounds, and here I'm just sitting here. And if each of you read the paper that I wrote based on a study that I did with about 1,200 people, I did a video conferencing study some years ago, you'll see that I'm breaking half of my own rules. But I just decided I was going to be casual today. John, the whole easy green screen thing is really interesting. I'm just going to kind of go back and forth in some plus delta things. Mostly they're pluses because there was the visual effect that you had with your hand when you went off of screen and then onto screen was brilliant, and it told me that you knew where the edge of your screen was, right? Which, so when we all start thinking about where and how body language shows up on camera as opposed to off of camera, becoming aware of where the field of vision is for your camera is a really useful thing. John, I would have loved to have seen how the use of green screen tied to communication. Meaning, would there be something that you would suggest or not suggest with regard to how that either enhances your communication and your message, like the other uses of visual aids or props, or is there a time that could actually be distracting for people? So that would just be my own personal preference. I realize that you were kind of sharing with us a tactical couple ideas. I loved also the change from visual to video and back, right? There was a time when you were showing up on video and then switched to a visual, which was your PowerPoint slide to kind of show us a diagram of how that would set up. Again, like what I just told Fabiola, that change helps get and keep attention because it introduces visual change into the environment, which is not just limited to the being on video. And finally, the pause that you gave, the vocal pause that you gave when you got to that very end, multiple image slide, was a brilliant use of attention getting in a different way. Because most of the time as speakers, we think we need to speak. But when we have a visual tool like what you were using, if you stop speaking, I actually am inclined to look at, to wonder what it is that you're showing me. And that, to me, I thought that worked brilliantly, and that's a great lesson that actually we could all use. So with that, I will pause on John and then make just a couple other overall comments.
All right, terrific. Anybody who came in late, part of the point of Roger giving all the evaluations and all the feedback is, he's been involved in the web conferencing industry since the days of the dial-up modem. So he's been thinking about this for a long time. So that's the perspective we're looking for here. So Roger, why don't you give us some overview comments? And I think I have some questions for you too, or I think other people will as well.
You bet. I'm just happy to hang out, take questions till whenever you boot me out of here. Here's just a bunch of random thoughts that I just jotted down. One, a tactic that you could do easily in an online environment that you could not do in a brick and mortar environment would be ways that you could have everybody give everybody feedback. In my club, one of the things that was encouraged was for, even if you were not the official evaluator, was for you to write a comment down for the speaker on a little piece of paper. Well, you could do that, and you could do that either publicly and share it with everybody, or it could be privately, or a combination thereof, which could be an interesting and useful way of using this technology. I liked the audio cue for timing. When I was not, that was useful for me. I think a timer like using something on your phone, if you look at my little video, would be one way that you could use this. Here would be an overall way of thinking about this when you present, which is, where do you glance at your tools to be able to get meaningful feedback, right? And so, if David, you want to share out the link to the little thing that you and I did about a month ago. I call this just learning to glance at your dashboard. Where do I glance to see hands up or to see chat so that I can see that, that Lois just said, "Hey, Arlene, I think your creativity regarding this was awesome." Right? When you do that as a presenter, that's really cool and highly engaging, even though that may not be necessarily how all Toastmaster speeches are made. And a final, just a final thought is, I love the fact that you already, even though we'll get a brand new club, you're already getting creative with how to take the same objectives, how to manage flow and manage speeches and manage timing and that kind of thing. And you're already getting creative. I think you've got some cool stuff ahead of you, and I'm encouraged. I'm really excited to see what David and all of you are doing.
All right, excellent. I was really curious. We just had a presentation on green screen. We've had a number of people experimenting with webinar effects, not webinar effects, webcam effects, these webcam tools, webcam software for special effects. I haven't seen a lot of that in professional webinars or training. On the other hand, we've been talking about how a lot of webinars are more boring than they need to be. So, you know, in terms of creativity, it's cool stuff. But have you used tools like that? Have you used green screen? Have you used different kinds of background effects in your presentations?
Green screen, yes, and no more. Too much of a pain in the backside. I have a 3-point camera lighting system like a professional photographer, so when I set up in my office, I can get all the lighting just right, and it doesn't look like I'm dark under my eyes and that kind of thing. Here's the ultimate question that I would say with any of this, which is, first, kind of like the Hippocratic Oath, first, do no harm. And it's kind of like, say, using animations in PowerPoint, right? An animation on a PowerPoint slide could communicate directionality or relationship between two things, right? But you could also have these flying crap from Mars that doesn't necessarily really help the story, right? It doesn't, and really that, which is part of what we're all learning as Toastmasters. In fact, we learned this in the speeches where we talk about visual aids, which is how does this enhance the communication? And a way to approach that negatively would be, if I took this out, would somebody be missing anything? So I don't think it's a right or a wrong. And I think there is a personal application. Most public webinars are kind of business to business, and they're not really designed to try to mimic a professional video environment, nor do I think the expectation is that you try to mimic a professional video environment. I do, however, think that, say, the difference between looking at John's plain gray background or Phyllis's, just plain wall, even though there's a little bit of a door, is actually less. It keeps my attention more on them as the speaker, right, and their face, than, say, David's, where I'm kind of going, oh, what is Camden Clark, something written on the whiteboard? Right? Okay. We can see what's written on the whiteboard, right? Oh. Not right or wrong. So, David, you might want to ask, does that help or hurt you in the communication process? Because if somebody's attention goes over there, even for a fraction of a second, that's the same cognitive effect as multitasking, right? Which detracts from
those notes on the whiteboard are from like a year ago. So I probably should clean my whiteboard, let people focus on the space photos in the background. That was supposed to be my dramatic fun stuff in the background. Anyway, a couple of people have raised their hands, so let's try and get to them. Lois Margolin, you had a question?
Yes, I was wondering, Roger, what is the impact of also having the videos going in and out of the PowerPoint presentation? Because I know it's easy to go ahead and have a PowerPoint presentation and put it up there, but the links into video, is that something that is becoming more common to hold the interest, or is that just a fly-by-night type thing?
When you say link into video, Lois, what do you mean? Using our webcams?
No, actually using a video that you're putting inside your presentation, so it's more
gotcha.
live.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a really common question in the world of just professional speaking anyway, right? Oh, video is such a hot topic. Should I be using video? And to me, I would always come back going, how does this help you make your point? Right? Especially in a Toastmasters environment where you got 5 to 7 minutes, right? Could you put in a piece of video that helps illustrate something? Yeah, absolutely. And but I also see oftentimes that people want to use effects whether that's video or using a polling function or using some tool, and it's not something that necessarily supports the communication. So that's always my litmus test. Is there a specific use case or something that you were curious about with regard to how you'd use video?
Well, there is, because we're online, and so it seems like if you're going the extra step of being an online type presentation, that it makes more sense to try and use different avenues to make it a more exciting type scenario. So that's why I was wondering, would you even go out and say, okay, I'm doing this presentation, let's see if we can make it a little more exciting instead of just a PowerPoint?
Well, one, absolutely. Two, I'm going to give you a PowerPoint tip, and then three, I'm going to turn it over to Graham because he's got a point. I'm a big fan of saying that one of the quote unquote rules of PowerPoint in the offline world actually are not as good as, don't serve you in the online world as well. For instance, if we know that people will probably start to tune out your webcam because it's not the same psychosocial visual experience that you have in an in-person environment, your PowerPoint slides become more important. And I would argue that having more slides as opposed to fewer will increase the rate of visual change and therefore improve how you connect with regard to intention, right?
Yes.
If I'm going to give you actually each a homework assignment. I want you to turn on the television, watch 10 minutes of any channel, and count the number of camera cuts, which is the number of times it switches from this camera to this camera. And I don't care what you're watching, it will freak you out how oftentimes Hollywood uses that tactic as a means of communication and or getting attention, and we don't even realize it, which is part of how I would support the reason why I think increasing frequency of visual change is useful, which also to Lois's point could make it a really useful thing to use video. John? 37. Believe it or not, I tested that once when I
was just throwing out a random number.
Oh.
And ignore that.
When I did a study, I did it actually watching a 17.5-minute episode of History Detectives on Oregon Public Broadcasting, and there were 301 camera cuts in a documentary, which is a camera cut every 3.5 seconds. So it doesn't have to be an episode of 24. Seriously, watch any 10 minutes of television, and it will change how you think about how should we use visuals in this environment. Graham?
We have three raised hands we should try and get to. You said something about Graham had a follow-up point? I'll let you make it quickly.
Very quickly, a couple of things. I'm a broadcast journalist, an average of 27 camera cuts in a 75-second TV news story. You're talking about the use of video, though, Roger. I, amongst other things, do lectures on cruise ships, which are very heavily PowerPoint presentation based. And I find that if I use, for example, a 3 or 4 second clip of the theme from The Love Boat, it gets a good reaction. If I use a 60-second clip which shows the latest version of the ships that are coming in, but I can see their eyes glazing over by the time that's finished. So it has to be fast, it has to be quick. If you're going to use video, make it worthwhile.
Sweet. Thank you, Graham. Let me also leave you also with another homework assignment. When you use video in this environment, you can't play it, you can't embed it in your PowerPoint and just play it from your desktop because people won't hear it. This particular platform actually lets you play video really well. It's something that you can test and use. Lou, question?
Yeah, first a quick comment. You mentioned about the fact that Hollywood has now the way they do video now is these quick cuts, and I forgot the statistic you threw out, but every 3 seconds there's a camera going. I have to say, when I watch movies nowadays, I get confused because the camera changes so much so quickly. There's got to be a point at which it's overkill, at which I just start to lose the storyline. That's just my own, maybe I'm getting old. I don't know, but that's just my opinion.
Well, apparently. No, you know what? But it comes back to how do you support the message? And here's a final. Well, I know we're out of time. The point is not do it so fast that you lose people. The point is that the typical webinar environment is far slower moving than what most people are accustomed to with their media consumption habits, and therefore, to Graham's point, 27 in 70 seconds, or right? I mean, it's brutal, and then we wonder why we can't get and keep attention in this environment. There you go.
Right. So my real
Phyllis had a question. Oh, go
has
ahead.
to deal with the fact that so far, all of the meetings I've attended, every speaker except one has done their presentation with shoulder and above, neck and above.
Yeah.
I believe Paul did one presentation where we saw his whole body. And I'm kind of curious, is there a rule of thumb, guideline, something along the lines of, for these situations, you want to do your whole body? Well, of course, if you're maybe experimenting with a dance step, I can see probably
Exactly. Well, no, that's exactly right. Which is, what are you trying to communicate? Because I would argue that you could turn off your video and in some cases be more effective without your webcam on. Right? I grew up wanting to be Paul Harvey, so that's my bias. If you can tell a story with your voice, you go a long way. So, but you make a great point, which it comes back to, how does this help the communication? Do you need to see somebody's feet moving? Well, then there you go. But oftentimes, most of the time we're sitting in front of a webcam, which is kind of a unique environment.
And in this case, we're live. Obviously there are videos where people might have pre-recorded video that has a close-up of their feet, then a close-up of their face, then something else, in other words, to convey messages, but that has to be pre-recorded. We can't do that live. That's a lot tougher.
Yeah, there's some ways you could do it live, but you use two different computers. You can instead, most of these platforms, instead of using your webcam, if you want, you can tell it, you can go into preferences and tell it to use a different camera. So if you plugged in a separate USB camera, then you could point it wherever you want. You could set it back 6 feet and then sit at a desk so it looks like you're, doing more of a newscaster kind of thing. The challenge with these kinds of cameras is that they're near field cameras that are really optimized for like you being 18 to 30 inches from the screen. And so they don't do really good very far back, and they tend to kind of make things really wonky. So if you're really animated like me and you get too close, you're gonna look like a freak real fast. So but it's worth testing because it's not hard, it's just different, right? And
Thank you.
Making us think about things that we maybe haven't thought about before.
Well, Carol's been raising her virtual hand and her physical hand.
All right, Carol.
For a while, so we should give her a chance to get a question in.
Thank you so much. I had so many questions, but I think they've all been answered. So I'm going to switch tactics on you, Roger, and I'm going to suggest that that in the online meetings, we have certain roles here as an audience. I would like to hear from you. What would you suggest is our need to improve the way we are functioning as audience participation when we are in something like Zoom? Do we keep still? Do we fade in and out? Do we not talk? Do we not move? I'm just interested in your concept now as you've watched us today.
Yeah. Most web conferencing platforms are designed for meetings as a use case. And I want to take us out of the technology world and just think about the subtle differences between how we connect and communicate psychosocially when there are different purposes. A meeting tends to be 5 or 15 of us at a table, roughly co-equal, as opposed to, say, a presentation, and which of course is what we do most often in Toastmasters or TED Talks, or training and facilitation, which is highly interactive, right? Ideally. So if there is an ideal way to be an audience member, I think some of that, one, depends on what is the expectation of the nature of the communication. But the second is, there are things that you can do in any medium that you can't do in another medium. And here's one of the big challenges that people most often experience in this when they come to this medium, which is psychosocially we notice what we lose before we notice what we gain. And one of the things that you gain is a way to be social and connect with each other in a way that you could do in an online Toastmasters meeting that you can't do in an offline Toastmasters meeting. For instance, like the suggestion that I made about chatting with each other. And actually you all have been very chatty in terms of keeping the chat going and sharing with each other while this is going on. And while we know that the brain can't multitask, I would argue that that is a highly engaging kind of thing, because now it's not just the speaker who's saying something, but you can be connecting and communicating amongst each other. And I think that's actually one of the most powerful things that you can do. And when I, because I've been teaching webinars now for 17 years, the first challenge most presenters have is how to get people to engage with the presenter. And actually, typically one of the more powerful things that we lose when we move into an online environment is peer-to-peer interaction, right? Because if Lois and I were sitting next to each other in the same room, I could lean over and go, "Hey, I really like the color of David's shirt." And that would be a personal interaction that's part of the psychosocial experience of an in-person thing. And you've all done a great job of that here today. I think you're in for some good stuff with regard to how these meetings unfold as you kind of dial it in for how that's going to work for you as a club.
In our land-based club, we usually, when we get to we're blowing past the supposed end time of our meeting, we usually tell people it's fine if you need to leave, if you need to eat or see your family or something. In this environment too, it's perfectly fine to step away, but we do have a couple of people who have their hands raised, and why don't we let them, Phyllis and then George.
Go for it. Hey, Phyllis.
So Roger, with all of the great advice you've given us today, and question, what is your preference when you're doing an online presentation? PowerPoint, you in person, a combination of both? What works best?
Do you mean PowerPoint or me on video, or a combination?
Yeah, a combination, so that, as you're saying, it keeps the audience engaged.
I started doing this when there was no video, or rather it was all streaming, and it didn't work very well because everybody was still on modems. So I learned, and the tools were far more rudimentary. So I learned to use PowerPoint, and I started studying what is that, how do we experience that at a psychosocial level? That was just me. And because I grew up wanting to be in radio, I just got comfortable not being on camera. Me personally, I like not being on camera because I like to stand up and walk around and not have to make eye contact. But that's me, because I have a voice and just had lots of practice to pull that off. I have asked thousands, and that's not a hyperbole, I have asked thousands of people what they like with regard to being in the audience at a webinar, and overwhelmingly they say they like seeing you on video. Now, bear in mind, people often like what they isn't necessarily good for them. and the research does not support video as an attention tool. It helps relationally, but it may not help from an attention perspective. So I tend to focus more on how do I use my slides to connect and communicate. And if there is something where I'm going to go back and forth, I use verbal direction. Hey, everybody, look at the camera right now. And what I want you to see is how I use this little timer on my phone, right? And now I have just directed your attention and told you where to look. Whereas most of the time, if I'm presenting PowerPoint, and very frequently for me, that will be PowerPoint, but I will frequently drop out of full screen PowerPoint mode to show something else, because I could just as easily, show you my notes, right? And just here's the notes that I took. And that change right there, what just happened for you visually? Right? There was a big visual change that happened in your kind of overall environment as part of just making that little change. And so a combination of tools doesn't all have to go into PowerPoint to be a visual experience. So think about the holistic visual experience, and think about how you direct attention to where you want people to pay attention.
Thanks.
All right, George, you had a question. Last question.
Yeah, it's similar to what you said already. When do you use picture-in-picture? Say you have a PowerPoint and you fade in an image of yourself talking when you're explaining something, and then you fade out and you go back to your full screen just with the PowerPoint. What techniques do you use, and when do you advise to use that? In particular, when you're doing a webcast where the back channel is just text from the audience back to you.
Well, I'm going to repeat the way that I just closed out my comment to Phyllis, and then I'll expand on that in one way. So to repeat George's question for Deborah, it was kind of like, when do you use picture-in-picture, or how do you decide what to use these tools? I'm going to say this: the experience that you're having here in this platform, which is Zoom, is going to be different than what you might experience in GoToWebinar or WebEx or one of literally 160 other tools. So some of that, I don't want to get too tactical, because I can tell you how to use Zoom in a way that won't serve you when you go back to work tomorrow and use WebEx. But to repeat the way I closed out my comment to Phyllis, I think the most useful thing is to think about, at each point along the way, what is the sum total of the visual environment, right? Right now I'm looking at X number of X number of videos. I have, I am or I'm not showing something. The sum total of that is the overall communication experience. And my question is, do I want to say, how do I direct attention where I want you to look? So if you think about some of the things that, say, some news organizations have done, like whether it's ESPN or a financial news channel, where the talking head is talking, and then there's the scrolling ticker across the bottom with the sports scores or the stock market moves of the day, right? I mean, they're increasing where you might look. I think that's interesting for a browsing audience, but as Toastmasters, we want to communicate to make a point. I think we want to direct attention where we want to go. So it's not a right or a wrong to use picture-in-picture or use slides or not use slides. The question is, how am I being purposeful at each point along the way, so that the sum total of that visual experience is communicating or directing attention where I want it to go. I hope that helped, George.
Yep, it does. Thank you.
You bet.
I said that would be the last question, but now I have another question.
All right.
I wonder if you have advice on the Zoom environment, because one of the things we've noticed about it is that the presenter doesn't actually control exactly what everybody sees. So the people in the audience can control whether it's in gallery view or speaker view, or whether a specific video is pinned. Any thoughts on how to deal with that, where you don't really have control of the whole environment?
Yeah, that's because this particular tool, as most of them are designed for meetings where people have more co-equal control, as opposed to presentations where you, as the presenter, are controlling the audiovisual experience of the presenter. Not right or wrong. It's just most conferencing platforms are designed for meetings instead of presentations.
Okay. So it's just a trade-off. We're going to have to deal with it.
Yeah. So if you want to, as you start to notice things as an attendee, then you could get better as a presenter in guiding experience. Hey, over on the right-hand side of your screen, you will see. Or if you want somebody to see their, your video screen full view, you can go, hey, go on to the upper right-hand corner of your Zoom, Zoom controls, and you'll see this button, and you can guide people's experience, even if they're going to have to respond, and some people may or may not respond, but you can't force that view for them in this environment.
But you can provide guidance to them along the way.
Right.
Just as you would be trying to attract their attention to specific elements of your presentation, or you see here in my hands, whatever.
You're right. In some platforms, you can guide that experience and kind of push it out to people so that you know exactly what they're seeing, because you change that environment. So,
all right. Well, we're almost 1/4 past the hour. I guess we should let you go. thank you for again, for being so generous with your time and for helping us on this whole series of projects related to online meetings and online presentations.
You bet. One final thought. Fabiola says, hey, what about facial expression? I will say this. Test it with a friend. Test two things. When you sit in front of your computer or wherever you're at, one, I want you to figure out what is the field of vision of your camera in your sitting or standing or your communication position, where you can kind of go, if I need to show something, I need to hold it here as opposed to over here because it does or doesn't appear on camera. The second thing, to Fabiola's point about facial expressions, is to get feedback on the nature of that relative to your distance from the camera, because you can see I only have to move a few inches and that looks very different. So you'll have to find what works for you, and if you're very expressive, maybe that means being a little farther back or toning it down. That's just kind of learning your environment. So
okay, I'm going to unmute everybody so Roger can hear the applause. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Roger.
All right, everybody. Have a good one.
Bye,
great
Roger.
evening. Talk to you soon. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Roger.